Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for joining us one more time for our California and Nevada chats. Welcome also to May. It is May 1st, and to say this has been a busy week would certainly be an understatement. So we'll get to that in just a moment. You know, some of the things that have happened on Tuesday, April 28th, unemployment insurance applications began to be accepted by the EDD for independent contractors and our self-employed here in the state. On Wednesday, the Back to Golf guidelines came out, so we're very grateful, and we'll hear from both Jeff Price and John Easterbrook and our PGA of America Secretary John Linder on the guidelines. So thank you for all the heavy lifting there. And in the past 48, 72 hours, it's been very, very busy in terms of golf rolling out here in both Northern California and Southern California. Predominantly Southern California opening, San Diego County back online today, and the Bay Area counties getting ready to open up next week amid a number of details that are going to need some discussion and some working out, which we'll get through today. So again, I thank to our colleagues in Southern California, Tom Addis, Executive Director, Assistant Executive Director. Nikki Gatch is here, of course, Craig Kessler, our Director of Governmental Affairs for the Southern California Golf Association, and thank you all who are joining us on the call today. So I'd like to start with some opening remarks from our Northern California PGA President, Dee Moriarty. Dee?
Thanks, Len. Hey, listen, good morning, everybody. It feels like in the blink of an eye, the whole landscape has changed since last Monday or last Friday. I think that's pretty amazing. Still some confusion, but we've got to think that it's good news that golf is starting to open up again. In San Francisco, looks like our city courses will open up Monday, and it looks like at least one of our private courses will open up hopefully on Tuesday. So I think the message is let's help people follow the safety rules. Let golf be a hero. Let's keep golf open and march forward from here. So thanks for the opportunity to say hello.
Muted.
Turn it back to Len.
Okay, thank you, Dee. And now to our Executive Director for the Southern California PGA, Mr. Tom Addis. Tom?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And it's nice to be with you again this morning on this Friday morning. And as Len mentioned, a lot happening in the world of golf specifically and in California. A lot of things to talk about, and we have a great panel this morning. Again, it's much appreciated that you are here to partake in this news. And we look forward to the next hour or so. We might end up going past 11 o'clock. Remember that we will have a Q&A and that please ask your questions in the go to webinar column on the right-hand side where it mentions where there's a
Unmuted
tab. And Nikki Gatch, our Assistant Executive Director, COO for the Southern California PGA, will ask the questions in a timely manner. Enjoy yourself. We'll hear from our president, Tony Latendre, at the finish of the meeting. And please ask questions, listen in. We're here to help. We're here to provide the information that's so critical to your everyday operations. So thanks for being here. And Len, let's go to it.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And yes, let's do that again. First off, I'd like to introduce our PGA of America team and the great work that has been done in the Back to Golf guidelines that came out on Wednesday. And then we'll delve into the myriad of questions that have now been generated here in the state of California as we look to roll out even further over the next week or so. A shout out to congratulations to our colleagues in Nevada. Nevada is open as of this morning. Governor Sisolak did seem to pull the plug on it, but then reinstate the original order, which was for golf to start again on May 1st. That has happened. So some of our colleagues are not with us this morning because they're busy at their facilities, and that in itself is great news. So way to go, state of Nevada. Okay, let's start with PGA of America Secretary John Linder. John, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
I guess I won't take up a lot of time, so I'll let John Easterbrook or Jeff Price talk about Back to Golf, because they've put in a ton of work in getting this through. It went through all sorts of different filters and levels, and the CDC's approved it. I can't imagine the number of hours that those gentlemen put in on this. I will say, from the Golf Relief and Assistance Fund, we are beginning to see individuals receive their funding. I know that we've gotten, as officers, we've gotten quite a few thank you letters from individuals who saw the funds hit their bank accounts in the last couple of days. So if you've applied for that, look for that in your account here shortly. I will also say that personally, I applied for an EIDL probably beginning of April, and that just hit my bank account today. So we're starting to see some funds come in. There's still a ton of work ahead of us, and it's great to see some golf courses start to open. I believe the state of Michigan's name is going to be changed to Confusion, because we are the state of confusion. If you haven't seen us on the news lately, you've probably been watching something other than news on TV. Michigan is back open for golf. We're much in the same situation of trying to gain clarity as to golf carts. The ruling that we're finding is through ADA, we can accommodate golf carts single user at this point in time. We're walking only for the remainder of it, but what we're finding is a lot of our public golf courses are opening up to carts regardless, and the private golf courses are staying closed for carts. And here again, going back to what we were like when we were under stay-at-home order, which we're still technically under. It's up to local law enforcement to monitor and to cite individuals for breaking the stay-at-home order or violating any of the executive order. The local officials normally are not really that concerned with it. They have way too more important things to do than to travel from golf course to golf course and to see if somebody's riding a golf cart. So here at the Country Club of Lansing, we have a very limited number of personally owned golf carts. We have 5. Those are going to be permitted for use beginning in May, or so today, but we will allow members of the same family to ride in golf carts. We will not allow more than 1 bag on the golf cart unless it's family members. We're still here in Michigan, as I said, in stay at home. We're now required to wear a cloth mask when on property with other staff members. So I'm locked in my room so I could take my mask off. But we're going to have extended sanctions on us through May 28th. Bars, restaurants, movie theaters, inside dining are not eligible to open at this point through May 28th. But fortunately for us, we're blessed with some good weather today and this weekend, and we're going to have a full tee sheet. We're operating under 15-minute tee times, which everybody seems to be working around splendidly. Full tee sheet from 8:30 in the morning here until 6:30 at night, and I think most of the people are just happy to get out and carry their clubs and get some fresh air. So with that, I'll turn it over to John, because he's done a ton of work on this back to golf operations playbook, and he'll be able to explain it to you far better than I will.
Mr. Linder, this is
Okay,
Nikki. We have one question on EIDL. So since you've applied and received the funds, maybe you can help lend some insight here. So any update on EIDL status? How do we know if we are approved or not? And if approved, when funds will be sent? It doesn't seem to be a way to check on status on the SBA website. Could you maybe share your experience?
Yeah, my experience was very, very similar to that. When I applied, initially I applied for the $10,000 grant. And then I got notice from the SBA that said that in order to give out as many funds as possible, that they were going to allow you to receive $1,000 per employee that you have on your staff that you pay directly. I'm fortunate at my facility that I don't pay any of the staff. The staff is paid for by the club. So the only person that I actually pay is myself. So I got $1,000 from the EIDL today, and and I didn't realize whether I was approved or not approved for it prior to checking my bank account this morning.
John, thank you. And regarding the GERF, I did receive a call from one of our section members who was thrilled that he did receive the funds through the GERF and also donated some back. So that's great when we hear things along those lines. So, Mr. Easterbrook, I'm going to ask you to hold for just a moment, and we have.
Len, I'll add.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I'll add one other thing, just so everybody's aware. Arjun Chaudhry has worked really hard with E4E, and they're going to transition their server. Coming up here, there will be shut down for 24 to 48 hours in order to upgrade their position with the server so they can better handle the influx for phase 2. So good news all the way around. Hopefully that people are receiving their money, and good news that phase 2 will be set up to better execute the needs and the applications of those in our industry.
Great. Thank you, John. So just a reminder, one of the characteristics of phase 2, two of the characteristics actually are a bit of a longer application process, but then also funds will be available up to $3,500. And if you have received any funds from phase 1, you can apply in phase 2, but it will be capped at $3,500. And I'm sure Mr. Easterbrook and Mr. Price will fill in some of the blanks there as well. So John Easterbrook, I'm going to ask you to hold for a moment, and I'm going to go to our Senior Director of Membership Services, Mr. Tom Rowley. Tom, thank you for being here with us this morning. Afternoon for you, but this morning for us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Len. So first of all, I want to let everyone know that we have gone live with the dues invoices being available. And as a reminder, we do have a change in the process this year with the deadline where normally be due June 30th. But due to this situation and thanks to all the great work of the sections, have pushed the deadline for both section and national dues until the end of October. And members have the ability to pay really in either two ways, can either pay the full amount anytime between now and the end of October, or can separate the section portion from the national and insurance portions and pay those two portions separately, again, as long as all are paid by the end of October. So we hope that provides help, especially for folks who haven't been working. And now, as Dee Dee talked about, certainly some better news with golf opening in so many places. And I know, John Easterbrook's going to talk about that, how to open it safely. But hopefully this helps out PGA members and associates, allowing them to a much longer time to pay the dues or even split it up. With the dues email that went out just 45 minutes ago, we've already seen almost a couple hundred payments. So there are certainly those that have not been affected as much and able to pay. And obviously that's helpful everywhere. And then something I always want to bring up is just a reminder of the member assistance program, very stressful and difficult time period right now. So whether it's for yourself, someone in your family, or another PGA member associate that you know or work with, we do have the resources of the member assistance program to help. And a lot of folks, we've seen a tremendous amount of increase in members who have gone to that and sought counseling in this first quarter compared to what we saw in the last quarter of 2019. So it's a great resource to have because times are difficult, and certainly personally reaching out to people, but sometimes there's even greater help that's needed from professional counselors. So just remember that, and that information is available on PGA.org, and I'm sure through both the Northern California and Southern California section websites. So thank you, Len. And not sure if we have any questions on either of those.
I don't see any, Tom, at the moment.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
Len may be having difficulty with his connection. So thanks, Tom, very, very much. And let's go ahead. And I know Jeff Price and John Easterbrook are with us to discuss the Back to Golf resolutions. Gentlemen, good to see you. And thanks for being here again and almost being regulars on California Nevada Chat. So thanks again and go to it, please.
Thanks, Tom. I'll just do a quick introduction for John, who has done yeoman's work in getting this together. The guidelines that were put forward on Wednesday and distributed were reviewed by the CDC, and John and I, thanks to PGA National Board member Chris Slidell, were able to spend almost 90 minutes with the CDC getting their feedback, which was really very, very positive. They complimented the golf industry for coming together, proactively trying to address this against the 3 phases that the CDC and the White House had laid out. And we're able to provide comprehensive feedback that was very helpful in the final draft. And John can walk through the details in far better focus and implementation perspective than I can. But I think ultimately, getting that CDC alignment was critical to be able to allow this to be used in all 50 states. And we recognize that golf across the country is in very different positions. And the intent here was to create a framework that was in place. In addition to the CDC, we've also engaged aggressively with an infectious disease expert, Dr. Connors out of Cornell, to really review the playbook side of things, to make sure that as an infectious disease specialist, that those procedures were in line with what the CDC and other health experts are advising. So this was done with the intent to keep golf, to open golf where necessary, and really keep golf and the industry open going forward. And so just a couple of things from the CDC that I thought were interesting to share. The first is they are not recommending masks in the traditional sense for folks who are going back to work. Their focus is, and I think John referenced it, on cloth facial coverings, because they are hoping to keep masks available to healthcare workers and those responding to medical emergencies in the field. And so that was a point of difference. Another point of emphasis that they have is that if you are not in a job where normally, and this is across all industries, where you would be wearing gloves, they are not recommending gloves for folks that are only when you would normally use them in the course of business. And their rationale for that is that the gloves, the COVID-19 can remain on surfaces, and it creates a false sense of security. You can have it on, a glove on, touch your face, and have the same challenges. So their perspective was very much about social distancing and not touching, kind of no touch environment, rather than thinking that the gloves were going to be something that would allow people to behave differently in the workplace. So those were 2 really key components. They have come out with, just this week, other interim guidance that we've added to PGA.org in terms of cleaning and sanitization. They have also talked about community mitigation, which just came out today, and that is also on PGA.org. So just framing this for John to walk through, that the CDC's engagement here was incredibly helpful. And we understand ultimately that state and county officials, as you all have seen in California, ultimately hold the power. And if someone in an area is allowing more than what is in phase 1, as an example, we understand that's going to happen. But we tried to create something, a framework on a national basis that could get that CDC review and alignment going forward. With that, John, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. It's been quite a whirlwind, 11 days, I can tell you that. And as Jeff said, we developed a national framework in which we can serve for our industry to not only get open, but remain open. And I want to get to questions because I know there's going to be a lot of questions. So I do want to give you a quick overview, just the timeline. And like I said, it's been a whirlwind 11 days. As an operator of facilities for, over 30 years, I knew this was kind of coming down the pipeline, and I started to noodle together a 5-phased approach, which I would tell you most of you as operators on the call are going, well, that makes more sense. But as Jeff was working with the Allied group on the responsible national messaging as it relates to returning our game on the media and in media markets and the public relations message, getting the timing right and that message put out and coordinated, they started talking about operations. And Jeff had asked me, what we had, and I said, hey, we're looking at a 5-phased approach, and it was the Allied group suggestion to jam that into 3 phases and match it up with opening up America. Again, as operators, we can all imagine that, especially if you think about phase 1, which was frankly, from a golf alone perspective, a lot of states had already been doing that, walking or single rider carts. And then phase 3 is kind of going to be the new norm. So phase 2 is where you get into the weeds, and that's where I think where the questions are coming from is how you cross over between phase 1 and phase 2. I think it's incredibly important to understand, as Jeff said, the CDC told us that we were the first sport to come to them collaboratively, cooperatively, thoughtfully, and most importantly, with health and responsibility, or opening responsibly. And they reminded us that that's going to help our industry in the long term. It's probably already helped in Nevada, frankly. As Len said, Nevada opened up. These folks are in close contact with the CDC and recommendations. And now our sport, as Jeff said, has a framework that we can turn to. It's not that long ago, 3 days ago, we still had 19 states that weren't allowing golf. I think it's only 16 now. I think, it might only be 15 with Nevada opening up this morning. But the reality is this is going to help our industry, not only with the local lawmakers on this pandemic issue, but it's going to help them understand that we as an industry are collaborative and responsible and thoughtful as it relates to how we think about our sport. So I think, we need to take the document. I know we'll get questions, but I would give you the broad-based comments of think globally, but act locally, as Jeff said. It is the local guidelines that are going to drive the specifics of what's going on. I have heard the three big pushbacks, and I'll answer these questions right now. Are why do we not have anything out on league or youth? And I will tell you that is being looked at not only in the golf space, but in the youth sports activity space, and where CDC basically told Jeff and I that they were probably a week away from what they were going to push out. But the challenge in the youth space is kids are not, very good at social distancing. And that's a challenge. Kids also bring families into situations where the safety of evacuating a golf course, when kids are all out walking, the social distancing aspect of removing them, where do they go? Those type things are all things, not only in our sport, but in soccer and Little League and all of that is how kids' safety is paramount, and how that, make sure that we don't have competitions with people coming from a community that is highly infected to a rural area that's maybe not be infected and bring the virus with them. So the playbook as it is written is a guideline for operators to look at. We are updating that every week. Actually, we're updating it every day. We're going to make sure that the updates are on 5 Things to Know on PGA.org on Wednesdays. As Jeff said, sanitation is a huge thing. I mean, if you talk about the 3 buckets that the CDC is very focused on, and trust me, I've said this a couple times, as someone who got in the industry to be a PGA golf professional, I never thought I'd be on the phone with the CDC. So it's really interesting to think about it that way. But employee safety is paramount, and that they couldn't reiterate that enough. Is that, and they said, you know, these phasing guidelines have, you know, are in 2-week increments and very specific as to the cases in their markets, and it's very specific to 10 people in phase 1 and 50 people in phase 2, and then back to the new normal in phase 3. Behavior of our guests is going to be watched and be monitored. As John Linder can attest to, Michigan's a perfect example of that. They are saying it's in every sport, not just ours, but our sport is and they said this, this is exactly what the lady said, golf can be a great sport to recreate if it's done responsibly. And so, but we're going to be watching, and the locals are going to be watching. And so we are going to remind you to practice social distancing, reminding you as an operator, you have to promote, and they use the word amplification of social distancing. And she gave Jeff and I an example. As these phases open up at a grocery store, they have floor decals and they have directional signage, and they limit people to walk through their areas. They said that's great, but we are asking the operators not only to do that and put the signage and the floor things out there, but we're making sure that it's announced on the PA. So great, you know, so I think, and they use, like I said, they use the term amplification. So it's our responsibility as operators to carry those messages out there. We will, they said it's important to continue to share best practices. And we will share best practices and post new websites on PGA.org, just like we did when we were going in the closures. Cleaning and sanitation is paramount to the CDC. Actually, Jeff mentioned the CDC updated their sanitation guidelines yesterday. Those were posted probably an hour after they were done. It's kind of cool that we now have a relationship with the CDC, and we got those updates literally as they were going out. Jeff talked about, you know, the gloves. You know, obviously when your staff is sanitizing, you need to keep those gloves. They need to keep gloves on. But as they said, you know, people who don't normally wear gloves, they don't want to put that false sense of security out there. I would say the 3, I'll go back to the 3 biggest questions. So leagues are one, and we have an interesting thought that we're going to run by some folks this afternoon on league play. But leagues are gatherings, right? And gatherings are not allowed in opening up America in phase 1. I mean, it's hard to have a league with a mandate of less than 10 people. But we're working through that, and we're trying to figure out some creative ways that maybe you could do tee times and do a virtual league. And we'll try to get some best practices out on that. The second thing is the driving range, practice facility. Why can't we have more than 10 people on a driving range? I will tell you the driving range was closed in the CDC's mind in phase 1 before Jeff and I started talking to him. And we got it to where it's more of a warm up, not practice, but 10 people, social distancing. That is one that, you know, we'll continue to monitor. But it's, and I know that the National Driving Range Association is trying to work through some guidelines on that as well. And again, if we can change these and relax some of these things as we move through this, it's a fluid document. And I think that's important for you all to understand. It's, as I said, as an operator, any one of us could have gone through that and picked out 10 things that we would have or should have done differently or could have done differently. But we were under, as Jeff said, CDC recommendations, and they were working through the documents and the phasing with us. So we had to, as they said a couple of times on the call, don't get greedy. And I think that's important to understand as the operators out there. And as Jeff said, use the document as a guide, but in your local markets, if restaurants are opening up and they're opening up under, I was dealing with this in Florida last night, the guidelines are not very restrictive on restaurants. And I just said, wow, that's interesting. We're under a mandate for a single rider in a golf cart, but yet the foursome can come sit at the table. And, everyone kind of paused, right? And they're like, well, that's by the letter of what they just sent out with the new policies and the new order. That's right. And I said, well, that can't possibly be their intent. And so, the gang I was on the phone with, they're going to try to contact the local city councilman and the mayor's office and find out specifically what they meant. Because again, it just, if that's what they meant, then we should relax the cart policies. If it's not what they meant, then it needs to be amended because it's a confusing message out there. You've got many states now phasing opening that are a little bit inconsistent with the Opening Up America, which is what I would say where you all need to operate in phase 2. Maybe it's phase 1 and phase 2 working locally. And that, we were going through Kentucky, yesterday morning with Kentucky, and the Kentucky the Kentucky governor said, they're going to open up horse racing and no fans, and they're in the single rider carts, through May 11th. But on May 20th, they're going to open up retail. But they didn't specifically ask about golf or talk about golf. So does opening up retail mean that we can open up, our golf shops? Probably yes. But that is, again, a specific question that needs to be asked. And under what guidelines are you opening up retail? Do things have to be in plastic in some states? What are your return policies? All those things. So that's where the local administration of this, or the adaptation of this, is critically important. On May 25th, they're going to allow barbershops, nail parlors, and hair salons to open. At what point does that, allow us, if people have cloth coverings on their face, to allow 2 people back in a cart? Those are the type things that we will work through as we get, again, as we had information coming in state by state, county by county with the closures. We'll do the exact same thing in the openings. But it's really important for you all as operators out there to understand that this is as Jeff said, a national document that's really taken a lot of pressure off our sport and allowed the CDC and local legislatures to turn to and say the industry has thought about this. They are thinking about this safely. So let's let them go ahead and open. The aggressive governors and aggressive counties or aggressive mayors, they were already kind of going and blowing anyway. This document helps everybody, but there are some of you that are ahead of this document, and you should, as Jeff said, and we can't say this enough, go to your local authorities and ask for their interpretation, and use this as a guideline when you need to use it. And most importantly, like I said, we've been focused on, opening golf up. This document's opening the industry back up. This has got physical structures in it. It will have programming in it as we open it up. But it's very important to understand that it's 100% aligned with the Opening Up America document that has the restrictions of 10 people in phase 1, under 50 people in phase 2, and then the new normal in phase 3. So with that, we can, unless Jeff, I know you and I've done this a few times, if there's anything you want to add before questions, we can get to more specific questions.
Sure. Thanks, John. I'll take just 2 more minutes. The plan from a communications and marketing standpoint is next Wednesday. We are targeting kind of pushing this out as allied organizations through golf media in terms of the industry coming together and the framework. We are also working on really the two phases of communication. During phase one, we are looking back to John's point about amplification of the social distancing message. We're collaborating to build a spot with tour players, LPGA tour players, and celebrities to really reinforce the importance of social distancing in golf. We also have in development a more pragmatic delivery that could be a poster or a cart identified piece of collateral that is about practicing social distancing at the course, about not letting your guard down, with things like stay home if you have a fever, always stay 6 feet apart, clearly mark your ball before playing, no handshakes or high fives, things that are specific to golf that we hope that golfers, as John has said before, golf can be easily social distance. It's golfers who don't social distance that create the problems. We want to create an awareness among golfers that it's really important to practice social distancing and not to get comfortable at the golf course, just like you wouldn't be necessarily comfortable in a supermarket. So you will see next Wednesday the rollout of this from a more public perspective. We wanted first to let this be operational in nature to answer questions rather than doing in the media. Next Wednesday, which is actually National Golf Day, will be a focal point for turning that to a more broad audience within the golf community and golf media. So with that, John, I think if there are questions, I think now would be appropriate to go forward with those.
Thanks, Jeff. This is Nikki. We have quite a few questions regarding golf
Okay,
instruction.
John, Jeff, you.
Jeff, are you still there?
Yes, still here, Nikki.
Okay, we had a couple of questions regarding instruction. If the CDC had any input on that, or if you have any indication of when some restrictions that are in place, certainly in some counties here in Southern California, could possibly be lifted.
I'll take that if John's not on or unavailable.
I'm on. Can you hear me, Jeff?
Yeah, go ahead, John. You've got this one.
Yeah, I think from an instruction standpoint, Nikki, again, phase one, there was no instruction when Jeff and I went to the CDC. It was virtual only. And, again, it was just, I'm not sure how they lined that up initially. We went to them and said, with strict social distancing guidelines, masks or cloth coverings, actually, that was when the cloth coverings discussion came up, when we were specifically talking about instruction, because we had masks on there, and they said, let's change all your reference to masks to cloth coverings. And they went down and they said, we not only want it on the instructor, but we want it on the person receiving the lesson. And so, again, we started with the range being closed and virtual lessons, and we got it to allowing individual lessons, no group lessons on the range. And I think that's just, again, if the limitations, and I know we have places that have massive ranges, and that's our next question. Or if you're in a community or a city that has a massive range, use these guidelines and go, hey, I've got tee space for 60, at 10 feet apart, under the guidelines that back to golf, it kind of says 10, and that's a smaller range. And maybe the local folks would allow you to do that. But we were able to get individual instruction put in phase one, and then group instruction obviously starts in phase two. So I don't know, that's where we sit today. I hope that kind of answered the question.
Okay, thank you. And for those that are asking, remember that's a general guideline. You always need to check with your local authorities. As an example, in San Diego County and some other counties, instruction is limited and restricted right now. So,
Yeah, and Nick,
I-
really important point just in general. The framework here is obviously these are national guidelines, but state and county and local regulations are the most important thing to follow. And so, as an example, if you're in phase one, but a local ordinance or a governor's edict allows for certain things that aren't here, in no way are we asking people to go backwards if the state and local folks have allowed more to happen. Essentially, you're pulling phase two forward into phase one. And if that's allowed locally, we're not saying in any way to go backwards. The point is to get golf open. This was a set of parameters for those, I guess now 15 states that still aren't open, that you have the opportunity to go with CDC review and alignment to say this is a way to get golf open. And then it really is about how can we get to phase two in a responsible manner. But at the end of the day, the worst place you could be is not following the guidelines and going beyond state and local regulations. That's when you get into trouble. If you follow what's on the state and local level, that's the safest path to go. And these guidelines create a framework for that discussion.
Thank you. Looks like maybe one more question. In the back to golf guidelines, it says that a beverage cart will not be allowed on the course. Would we be liable if we were to have a beverage cart on the course serving members, even if we are social distancing and selling single-use items? This comes from someone at a private club.
So I'll take that. Go in just because the CDC.
I'll fill in after you, because this one is a topic this morning too. Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to start with the CDC, John. They were very clear that from a liability standpoint, state and local regulations are ultimately going to be the determining factor there. So it's both what are the guidelines that have been issued were specific to golf of what can and can't be done, and then what are the overall kind of liability obligations that you would have in a particular state. And so that really is a state by state question as to the liability side. I'll turn it over to John in terms of the golf cart specific issue.
Yeah, and so that's exactly right. And I would, whoever asked the question, I would call your county health official, frankly, or even your alcoholic beverage commission person, because takeout in many states is defined, and that's where phase one has been, and even some states phase two. Takeout as defined in many states, the food has to leave the property. And a beverage cart, the food doesn't leave the property. It's actually food service, and it will put your liquor license at risk. And so Jeff is telling you exactly what to do, is that you need to ask your ABC locally what they're thinking, and define clearly what takeout means in your county and specifically in your state before cranking back up your beverage cart operation.
One more question. I'll see if I understand this. It says, can I give a semi-private lesson for members of the same family, or are there same restrictions like we're seeing with golf carts?
Based on the CDC guidance, and again, your state and local, whatever you're in from a county perspective or state within California or Nevada will take precedent. But the CDC's framework was one-on-one individual lessons was the only thing that they were comfortable with us including in phase one to align with their broader phase one for opening the economy.
Okay, thank you. I think that covers any back to golf questions that have come in so far. Thank you.
Thanks for having us again.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Nikki, I'm just going to say this.
Couple points.
Keep the questions coming. Or get them to Len or Tom or Nikki or Craig, because it's a fluid document. You all are out there operating. As Jeff said, we created this with the CDC And under the CDC guidelines, we know all, we intuitively know the questions, but you're in the trenches. And, like I said, I wasn't even thinking about clearing a golf course until yesterday when it came up. And that's a real issue. When you have a golf course that is walking only as we reopen, and you have a thunderstorm come in, and you have no place to shelter the people coming off the course because your clubhouse is closed. Again, it's just something wasn't on my radar. So keep the questions coming, and as Jeff said, act responsibly. If you don't know, check with your local lawmakers or your county health officials. That's the best advice we can give you.
And then just
Great.
one comment, I know Craig is going to follow. Craig's communication and leadership has been incredible. We actually, Craig, used another bit of your announcement yesterday regarding San Diego and the public health officials' comment about golf being open because it's recreation, not for the business purposes. And again, I think not being greedy and keeping us open and staying open responsibly is an important message we're trying to take nationally. And your specific citing of San Diego was very helpful on a national level. So thanks to Craig for your continued leadership.
We have one more question. I think John might have touched on this with retail, but the question is, how will retail play a role in rebounding?
I'm not sure. I think it's just getting back to normal. I don't know. I haven't looked at the specific retail, the actual physical, like shirts and things. I know there'll be some parameters around golf balls, and we still have, the tees and the scorecards and things have to be in sealed bags right now in some phases. But as retail opens up, as the physical layout to me is the easiest thing. It's going to be, and I'm old enough to remember this, but in the 70s, everything was in plastic bags on the shelves. I sure hope we don't get back to that, but it could be. And what are return policies? And in the short term, until we get back to, and it's funny because Jeff and I had used the terminology normal, and the CDC cautioned us on saying normal because they said we will have a new normal, far before anybody ever even thinks about getting back to normal, if we ever get back to normal. So, the new normal of retail, what does that look like? I'm not sure I know, but I will tell you, we will link under retail on PGA.org as we get retail practices. There'll be a link there, because there'll be an expert that's focusing every day on how to get retail back, and Nordstrom's or whoever else is going to have ideas. And I don't claim to be an expert, but we will make sure that the tools are there for you all to be able to get to those links quickly, so you know what your golf shops need to look like.
And John, the only other thing would be, from a CDC perspective, no retail in phase 1, restricted operations of retail in phase 2, and then in the new normal, back to more normal retail kind of operations.
Nikki, any more questions? Was that?
One more, and that last question was from a sales rep. So thank you, Kevin. I think his question was more general. How will retail in general have the ability to rebound? So I'm not sure if you want to address that. The other question was, what are thoughts on usage of the buckets for range balls on the driving range and reuse? Should they be sanitized after every use?
I can handle that one. Again, following CDC guidelines, they don't want, the answer to the question specifically is yes, it should be sanitized. They want individuals to hit all the golf balls They don't want pyramids out there. They don't want common anything. Anywhere on the golf course that you can have a common, whether it's, peanuts in the shop when we reopen, our locker rooms, whether it's tees on the first tee, ball markers on the first tee, water fountains, and again, practice balls. They don't want practice balls left down there. They want individuals to take the practice balls, hit all the practice balls, and be done. So and then follow strict sanitation programs for golf balls and driving range, which we have listed on PGA.org. So the short answer to that is absolutely the range baskets and the golf balls need to be sanitized before each use.
Thank you. And one more, is there a clear list of signage that needs to be posted at a facility? Like, do we have access to PDFs either from the Back to Golf or CDC or public?
That's a great question. I'll follow up with the CDC on if there's specific signage.
John, I can take it because we're actually trying to use their guidelines to create signage that would be appropriate. I mentioned the kind of front nine of social distancing in golf, and those are things that we're trying to push out. In addition to the PSA that we're going to do from a television perspective and radio, but then also what other kind of, when we get to retail, our floor decals that are working so well in grocery going to be part of what we need to do. So we're taking their advice and creating those, and our hope is by early next week that we have those available for you to download from our website that we're literally ramping up over the course of the weekend. We'll also have them on PGA.org.
Okay, thank you. Lynn or Tom?
Okay, thank you, Nikki. Thank you, John and Jeff. John, early on, certainly that working with the CDC has just been a great boon to this whole process and keeps us going on one path instead of divergent path, trying to tie it together later on. John, you mentioned early on that there were new sanitation guidelines from the CDC. Are they on PGA.org, or do you recommend we go right to the CDC site to get those?
They are posted on PGA.org as of yesterday, about 20 minutes after we got them. As if I've looked at this document enough that I believe it's either the bottom two lines of the playbook is sanitation, and the link is right underneath that.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And we'd like to thank you both for being here again, all the tremendous work that's been done and the iterations yet to come as we refine the processes. And now I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Governmental Affairs for Southern California Golf Association, Craig Kessler. And Craig, as Jeff said, part of this team with news coming out. So, out of these last 48 hours in both Northern and Southern California. So, Greg, please bring us up to date.
Well, good morning, everyone. And Jeff, thank you for those very kind words. I appreciate them. Well, Governor Newsom threw us a curveball yesterday. It wasn't an entirely bad thing. In fact, there were a lot of good components to what he did. So I'll just refresh everybody's memories, or for those of you who don't hang on various press conferences and government meetings all day. We had all expected Governor Newsom to show up at the press conference and announce that he was taking control of all of the state's beaches and closing them down. And that would have been an indicator that he was breaking away from the not one size fits all philosophy that he has taken to the COVID-19 crisis from the beginning. And that wouldn't have necessarily been a good thing for the golf industry, as we've worked county by county by county to try to get golf back on board. But he didn't do that. He didn't address the beaches that are open in Santa Cruz, Ventura, or on a partial basis in San Diego County. He addressed Orange County and Orange County only. I'm going to assume because of the scenes that were on national news and then on the front pages of a lot of papers. There's some dispute as to what those pictures meant, but we'll leave that to the County of Orange and the Governor of California to work out. So good. So he didn't do that, which keeps the local control issue in place. And then he did another good thing for the golf industry. He gave it a shout out, very specifically referenced it, along with one or two other things that he had put on his website as a long list of now recreational activities that are identified as amenable to this sort of opening phase of reintroduction of activities to our life. Keep in mind that up until now, one of the greatest problems for an industry trying to work on a county by county level, particularly with public health directors, is that there's always been in the background this notion that golf, well, not this notion, the fact that golf is not identified in the statewide order as an essential service. Now, there were vague references to recreation, but then again, every county was encouraged by the governor to exceed his minimum standards in the state order and to add whatever they wanted. And as counties began to add prescriptions on hiking trails, beaches, playgrounds, you name it, golf certainly got lost in that mix as well. So that's the good news. Golf is now officially sanctioned by the governor of California to be a recreational activity, not a business. And in fact, Jeff, I ran that quote I shared that quote from the public health officer in San Diego because it's something that hasn't been stated publicly very often, but it's been in the backdrop of everyone who's had conversations with various levels of government on this issue. And that is, golf is a non-essential service in this state. And with a wink and a nod, we know it's also a business, but we need to proceed entirely in terms of public policy and in terms of getting it back online as if it's a recreation. I also put out there that golf never fell into the trap, despite getting hundreds of emails to encourage us to get into the trap of making the business argument, because you need to keep in mind that business in America at this moment on these stay-at-home orders is in the tank. Unemployment is headed towards 20%. I don't even want to think what the national debt is headed to, into the trillions. We'll be living with this for a great deal of time. So put yourself in the position, whether it's a governor or a member of a county board of supervisors, every mall is closed, every business is closed, people are going bankrupt. The federal government is literally printing money in order to keep us from falling into a death spiral, a deflationary death spiral. And then you show up and suggest that you're a $13 billion industry in the state of California. By the way, we have those that are in the hundreds of billions routinely, and somehow that plea is going to fall on receptive ears. No, it's not. Get in a long, long line, and golf is somewhat at the back of that line. So the key always has been and will continue to be, and my friends from the PGA National made this point, but a lot in their presentations, but it's a point that bears continual repetition. Golf, at least in California, I can only speak for that authoritatively, positioned itself from the beginning of the pandemic as one of those activities peculiarly amenable to being in that first phase of reopenings, and that's exactly where we're moving. Now, the bad news in the governor's press conference was that he alluded to having given a little bit of definition in that list of acceptable recreational activities, particularly to help the 6 Bay Area counties that were planning to open on Monday. I don't think he was paying attention that San Diego is opening today and had planned to open with single rider carts accommodation and had to rewrite that order in the afternoon to be in alignment with the governor, because San Diego and Orange County in particular, and I can't say this of all the counties, have been rather scrupulous in the desire to remain, whatever they do, to remain consistent with the governor's statewide orders. That's not necessarily true in other counties, but it is in those two. And so they rewrote it to eliminate the single rider carts and to go exclusively with walking, consistent with what the governor said. Now that's a problem, and I want everyone to know that the California Alliance for Golf, by the way, Len and Tom are board members. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, there will be an emergency meeting to develop some kind of response to this, because many counties have been successfully using single rider carts for weeks now. None more than Sacramento County, which is right outside the door of where Governor Newsom gives these press conferences on an almost daily basis. And it's been done fairly successfully. It's being done still in Riverside County. They've not reversed the order yet. However, there's an item on the Board of Supervisors meeting next Tuesday that would in essence align all of their directives with the governor, and that would, in my mind, bring golf under it and would eliminate the single rider carts that are riding around the desert of California and Riverside County today. So the California Alliance for Golf will meet to develop a response, a strategy, how to move forward. And the governor also in that press conference gave a great opening to golf and to others, indicated that he wanted, as we were beginning to reopen, he was inviting stakeholder groups, mostly businesses, but also recreational groups like golf, to contact his office and assist in many ways in maybe refining and prep, and much of the process that we've all gone through on a county by county basis. And I think it's at that time that the golf industry may explain that the issue is safety, and that we believe under a certain set of protocols that have been used in many counties in California and many places across the country can be successfully reintroduced. I know there was a bit of a panic yesterday afternoon to have this immediately reversed. This is a personal opinion. I don't think in a state of 40 million with so many competing interests necessarily requiring immediacy is a great strategy, but accepting an invitation to open up a dialogue and then having that dialogue be focused entirely on two things, recreation and public health and safety, might be a good in to develop that. And as has been the process throughout, even on these county by county orders, they change. And they don't actually, and they can change rather rapidly. So for example, yesterday afternoon, beginning today, in Riverside County, up until through yesterday, you needed a face covering in order to play golf. Well, that's problematic in the desert where it's over 100 degrees today. But that was eliminated. There was no government meeting. There was no public discussion, particularly. But it's moved, and that has been the trajectory of most of these countywide orders. Over time, the public health officers are willing to dip their toes in the water and sort of start something. And if it goes well, goes a lot better than beaches in Orange County, in other words. If it goes well, they're willing to stick another toe in the water and another toe in the water. I know it's difficult with so much pain out there, so much loss of income, so much loss of jobs, loss of revenue, and all the rest of it, to accept a council of patience in a situation like this. But it's been the one thing that's worked best for us. And I think you hear in my comments precisely what you heard from John and Jeff on a national level, that has been the best and the best strategic approach. And again, I was pleased to hear, and we've heard this a lot in California. I particularly heard this during the great drought, that this notion, and we should be proud of it, and we should advertise it. We should trumpet it, loudly, and as much as we can. Golf is often the first to show up, whether it's with a public utility on water issues or environmental issues. In this case, with the CDC on the health and safety issues on reopening the recreational activity, to the degree to which we can be there and show up and indicate that we want to work with them to develop, in order to, in essence, help them fulfill their mission. We not only can move ourselves to the front of other industries that don't quite take that collaborative approach, but we can also get not only a result faster, but a much more enduring result. Again, we will look back on this and how we perform, not just the golfers on the golf course in terms of practicing social distancing, so we don't end up like Orange County beaches, But in essence, with the policymakers and even the elected leaders, I know that there have been golf has achieved a lot of dividends in that particular realm, because I've heard that same meme coming back. You came to us before we had to come to you, and worked out all kinds of protocols for water conservation and things like that. So keep in mind, there will be life in a long one on the other side of this pandemic curve, which is by no means over. We're just coming out of the early response, which you need to keep in mind was not beating back this virus. This virus isn't going away. It was simply dampening that pandemic curve sufficiently so that policymakers are satisfied, or that the public health system can accommodate not just all critically ill patients, not just with COVID-19, but also with all those other maladies that don't take holidays just because there's a pandemic. That has been satisfied, and thus we are now reintroducing the first things. And the good news is we're talking about getting ready. Many states are ahead of us. California will lag behind. We're talking about getting ready to start reintroducing actual commerce. And of course, there's a substantial portion of golf, which is commerce. By the way, that reminds me, most of the conversations I've had, often in private, have been with a bit of a wink and a nod. We're calling you a recreation, but we know you're not quite the recreation as just walking on a trail. We understand there's a business component, and the notion is don't press that too hard, or you're going to push the envelope a little too much, and the whole thing may come back and collapse on you. Again, that's I think where we stand with the governor's order. I wish I could indicate. I've given some indications of what maybe I think the California Alliance for Golf will do later this afternoon, but I've come to learn that any association or collaborative effort that involves a lot of parties who may have different opinions, it's difficult to predict how it will come out. But I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good about this, and I think that in the final analysis, it will take probably a good, smart, and collaborative approach moving forward. So, in Southern California, all counties are playing golf today. Some of them are walking, some of them are still riding. We'll see how that plays out, except Los Angeles County, which, as I told a reporter for the San Diego Union Tribune when he asked me, was there any sense to the order of golf coming back in these counties? And I said, if you take a close look at the population levels, it's pretty much in reverse order. Los Angeles County has 10.2 million persons, and it was always going to be the most difficult. It has the most COVID-19 cases, and it has the most deaths in the state, and it's by a fairly wide margin. So even though that trigger is ready to be pulled in Los Angeles County, I think plans have been worked out well in advance as to how to do it, plans which include single-rider carts. We'll see if that remains true. That was delayed because of those numbers. And if I had to predict, and as Yogi Berra told us, predictions are very dangerous, particularly about the future. I would say probably no later than May 15th, we'd be looking at Los Angeles County opening up as well. I would hope by then it would be able to open with single rider carts because there's some time between today and the next 14 days to maybe change that at statewide level. But I wouldn't necessarily count on it. But I think that will bring, at that point, I believe every county in the state will be back on board. It's hard to keep track of 58 counties, which for those who are outside of California, we have one county in the state with a population of 9,000 and one with 10.2 million. So one size fits all really doesn't fit all in the state of California. So I do see a question here from Mike Woods of Hagen Oaks in Sacramento and there are probably some other questions I missed about an accessibility device. I will say that every time the golf community has asked for a clarification on walking only, what about the Americans with Disability Act? In every case, a county council has ruled that yes, that federal law preempts this, and they've indicated to golf courses that you not only can accommodate carts for those who are what they refer to as bona fide handicap, but you probably must do that. So that's been the pattern so far, but if there's a pattern to the pattern, it's that two counties interpret the same law differently, and both are convinced they're right, and far be it from someone like me to try to argue with them at that particular point. So with that, I hope I've shed a little bit of light on where we stand, and particularly where we might be going in the handful of days ahead. But to say, I've often, everyone's heard the phrase hard cases make bad law. Well, crises make for really bad public policy, and that's to be expected. So in this case, we have been muddling along in a sea of ambiguity and doing our best to bounce from thing to thing to thing to thing. But I will say this, overall, I think the golf industry in the state of California has done very, very well. And I have been told, mostly by reporters, that compared to other recreational activities, we've done a whole lot better than they have. And I think, and I believe that it's in part because some years ago we got organized. I know those of us who were part of that organization, the first thing on our lips is always, we have to get better organized. But at times like this, I think it's important to recognize that all things considered, we've been a little too hard on ourselves. We've done a little bit better, and we'll move on. I don't know about you, but I refer to the moment as when, the last 6 or 8 weeks, as everything was moving in one direction. And for golf, it was a very positive direction. And then the world changed. And I think we've all been slowly coming to terms that this is going to be with us for a while. Yes, we're going to get out in the golf course, but when will the clubhouses open? When will food and beverage become a component again? When will we necessarily be able to do carts? When will we be back up and running? When will we be able to sell merchandise? When will retail come back? All those kinds of things. And clearly we're in for a bit of a long slog, and we don't know exactly how things will come out on the other side. But if past is prologue, they will come out different. And yeah, there's going to be problems, but there will probably also within there be opportunities to take fresh looks at how we organize ourselves, how we market ourselves. And ironically, moments like this kind of allow for a bit of a leveling and cause persons who are usually too busy with their day-to-day concerns to take a hard look at longer-term strategies. We might be able to do that and come out a couple of years from now as a much stronger industry if we take that sort of optimistic attitude, or we look at part of this as a challenge, or if we look at it the way I asked you to look at the governor's news conference yesterday. Yes, he threw us a curveball on carts, but he also gave us an opening to be able to change that. But he did something else as well. He eliminated that question that was in the back of every county's minds as we approach them. You're really a business, and you're not an essential business. So I think we need to keep that in mind, focused on the opportunities and those positive things that are out there, grab onto them and run with them as best we can. And with that, I will end my filibuster, and I am sure there have been some questions that have come by, and with any luck, I can actually answer them. Thanks.
Craig, we've got just a couple
Great.
here.
Do you have any others for Greg?
Yeah, just a couple.
At the moment?
Mr. Holmes is wondering if he heard you correctly. No face coverings to play golf in Riverside County. Is that correct or incorrect?
Yes, Ed, if you're listening, and hello. Yes, no face coverings in Riverside. They are discretionary at this point. They recommend that when you're sort of in and around the clubhouse area, which of course is closed, but you're still more persons, more opportunity. But once you get out on that first tee and you're on the golf course, you can take it off.
And is travel of 10 miles or less to recreate a state rule, or is that county by county?
That is exclusively a county rule. That is not in any state order.
Okay. Craig, the state site FAQ actually states singles, walking, no carts. Is it your contention that groups larger than singles are allowed under the state order?
we took a long look at that one, and you will see that phrase singles attached to a lot of recreational activities that by their very definition require at least two people. So it refers to tennis singles. I think that means no doubles tennis. It refers to badminton singles. Well, it takes at least two people. It's on other sides of the net. It refers to throwing a football in a park. Well, you just go throw it and then go. I mean, in other words, so there are a number of things, and I think what that meant was by singles was no group activity. We will try to clarify that in approaching the governor. And I think when you look at that site, and by the way, since I first looked at it, 24 hours, well, actually about less than 24 hours ago, it continually changes. So I want to indicate to everyone that these are extremely flexible and fluid and amenable to changing and amenable to change, to moving as well. So in answer to Joe Kobrick's question, I can see that if that motion were to pass in Riverside, and it looks like it will on Tuesday, what would happen is that order would then come in alignment with the state order. And I think the only thing that would be put in jeopardy based upon the Riverside order would be the cart issue. And that is something that I sent off to 40 GMs in the desert this morning that they needed to be alert for.
Okay. I think that's it, Craig. Thank you.
Okay, Craig, thank you. And clearly we have some work to do, which will begin this afternoon. But as you mentioned, the invitation is there and the door is open to discuss this with Governor Newsom. And as we've said a number of times, kind of good news, bad news. But we'll get through this. You know, one thing that you and have John, Mr. Easterbrook stressed this morning when talking with the CDC, there are a couple of moments when agencies, governmental, be they, you know, county, local, or state, or even federal, have said, you know, be careful, you're starting to push a little bit too hard. You have been an advocate of being patient over the past months, and clearly that's been paying off. And so as we head to, you know, our meeting this afternoon, Craig, but also as we get closer to Sacramento, I think our best avenue is just keep the impacts we have. And an interesting thing would be not only our voices represents all the allied associations in the state of California, but would we not want to use some of the success stories, particularly regarding the golf cars? That's where I'm headed with this. Would we not want to use some success stories of facilities that have been open, successfully managing riders as part of our message, particularly as we have facilities open in the governor's office?
Yeah, we might take him out. I alluded to answering a question from Mike Woods. We might take him out to Mike Woods' 36-hole complex in Sacramento, Hagen Oaks, where it's been successfully going on for 6 weeks. That's a busy municipal golf course. And clearly and simply, yeah, the answer is yes.
Okay, Greg, you cut out. I think you might have answered it. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for joining us. I think you see the work ahead of us. Please keep in mind, refer to ncpgalinks.com, scpga.com, and pga.org. We're constantly updating the information. As a matter of fact, we do have links there to the County Department of Public Health, which can also guide to the state orders. So we'll keep posting all of that information, even links to the unemployment, to edd.ca.gov, pj.org, of course, with the Gulf Emergency Relief Fund and the Member Assistance Program. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our Mr. Tom Addis, Southern California PGA. Nikki, thank you so much for handling all those questions.
Thank you, Len, very much. And thanks to everyone, Tom and John and Jeff and Mr. Easterbrook and Craig and everybody. We appreciate your time. Before we move too much farther and adjourn for the day, would like to introduce the president of the Southern California section for a couple of words, Mr. Tony Latendre.
Good morning, and thank you, Tom, and thank you everybody that's on the call. And as we roll into the first part of May here, it's hard to believe we're almost a month and a half removed from when our state order first came down in the middle of the month to shut everything down. But just want to thank everybody, both the panelists and the attendees on these calls for your continued participation and feedback and providing us with information so we can keep everything up to date. So appreciate everybody's assistance there. I want to just leave you with this message today that, being open doesn't necessarily mean that we're back to normal. You've heard it a couple times on the call today, and we keep hearing this, that I think we need to pace ourselves. I'm constantly telling members here at the club to, relax. We can't have you gathering on the patio. As much as I'd love to have you sitting here having a beer, whatever it is, I just can't have you on the patio hanging out. There's no gathering. So it's our job, I think, because there are so many eyes on us, to rein people back, our golfers, our members, to make sure that they are helping follow those guidelines. Because of the eyes that are on us, as I've said before, we're going to fall under a lot of scrutiny. So encourage you to continue to do that. And I know everybody's been making their best effort. It's difficult at times, but thank you for doing that and continuing. As an item of that note, I'd like to share that the Southern California Golf Association, as well as the Southern California PGA, have gotten together on a collaborative effort to send out a message or a PSA, if you will, that is going to talk about that a little bit. And when you see that, I encourage you to share that with your golfers at your club, your customer base, whatever, so that they can see this message. And it will allude to that same thing. Let's be mindful. Let's follow the guidelines. And the better we are at following the guidelines, the less chance we have of somebody swooping in on the back end and causing us to take one step forward and another 2 steps back. So let's just be patient. Let's go with it and pace ourselves, as I said. But again, thank you to everybody for the time, the dedication to this, and I appreciate the fact that I can be on these calls and keep up with the information. So appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, Tony, thanks for that, and thanks for mentioning the communique from the Southern California Golf Association and the SCPGA that we hope will get out this week. It's going to go to each of our PGA professionals in the section, as well as you said, Tony, the 175,000 or so SCGA members. So look for that and check out the guidelines also on every website, scpj.com, ncpjlinks.com, and of course pga.org. And again, they are guidelines. They are going to be updated, will be updated, and your agency guidelines are also in many cases posted as well. Speaking of the websites, just so you know, as you reopen and work on reopening, we have a link that will provide you with some supplies, whether they're disinfectants or sanitation stands, whatever they might be, paper towels. Take a look at our COVID-19 spot on the Southern California PGA website. Click on that, and there are some partners and other suppliers who are on that link. So feel free to use that, and please use that. And we appreciate your time. One more reminder that if there were questions that still need to be responded to, we will do that from each panelist and each association via email. And so if you had a question that has not been responded to, we will respond in that manner going forward. So thank you again for attending, and we look forward to next Monday. And we ask that you lead the way as you have been, set a great example for our sport and for outdoor recreation. And we look forward to seeing you Monday. Thanks very much.